session recording in the presentation archive page in the website in the bi.sqlpass.org quite soon. And if you want to register for PASS Business Analytics conference, you would have the discount code. You can use that discount code and get $150 off. And we would have a list of SQL Saturday events listed for February and March, most of them in North America, and also virtual chapter meetings. And if you are interested in any of volunteer work or registering sessions in virtual chapter listing, this is list of virtual chapters. If you want to volunteer someone for outstanding volunteer program, you can do that with this email. And again, voucher for PASS Business Analytics. Thank you. We have Andy as a presenter. Let me just give it to Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Hi. Okay.
How are you, Reza?
Good, thank you. Andy is actually author, mentor, trainer, international speaker. You actually know Andy from the books that he written with SSIS and his SSIS talks and precons and lots of useful stuff. I even learned SSIS with lots of materials from Andy's weblog and books and actually speaking sessions recording. So today we are honored that we have Andy as a speaker. Andy, I can hand over this to you. You can start sharing your screen now.
Okay. I'm waiting for GoToWebinar to catch up with us. So far, it's telling me I can only share my webcam. That's what it's been telling me all along. I'll spare you.
You should have the start screen sharing in. Let me just check. Are you presenter? Okay, make presenter. Sorry,
I'm sure it's coming.
I'm.
There we go.
Okay.
I've got it. Let me pick the right monitor. And I'm hoping that you can see a Visual Studio
Awesome.
or SQL Server Data Tools BI. Can you see that?
Yep, I can see that. Yeah. Great.
Okay. All right. If everyone can see that, we'll get started. I have slides that I usually do for this talk. I'm going to forego those because it's you know, I'm not a big slide person. Obviously, I use if you've been to any of my talks, I use both colors in PowerPoint, black and white. And I like to get to the meat of the talk today, especially with this virtual audience. And I understand there's folks here from all over the world. If you're up and it's dark out, I want to thank you. I know Reza's speaking to us from the future. Here in Farmville, Virginia, it is in the U.S. It's noon, right at lunchtime, and it's 6 a.m. there tomorrow. So I'm assuming that tomorrow's going to be a good day, Reza, because you've said you're having a good day. So. So let's dive in here. This is Visual Studio 2010. This is what shipped with 2012. And what I've got installed here is I've got an add-in that you can get for free. It's called Bids Helper. Let me bring up Chrome here really quick and type in Bids Helper. www.codeplex.com, and you can go there and download this. This is free, and everything I'm going to show you today can be done using the free tool, the free include that's for Biml, Business Intelligence Markup Language, that's included in this download. This is a fantastic tool. If you don't have BIDS Helper installed, I want to encourage you to install it and check it out. Back in the days of SSIS 2005 through 2008 R2, it was very difficult to do SSIS development without BIDS Helper. And I just want to commend the developers and folks that did this for free. So that's where you can get this, and you can install it right alongside. Make sure you get the version that's correct for your version of SSIS and SQL Server. But this is what I'm using. Once you've got that installed, you'll see a few extra options. That's not going to work. Okay, sorry. You'll see a few extra options when you right-click in Solution Explorer. For instance, if I right-click on the project, I've got a window here that I think, oh, good, it held. Add new Biml file. That is that's a function of BIDS Helper, and you can create one. I'm going to add one here very quickly just to show you some of the goods. This one is named Biml Script 1, and I'm going to double-click it so that it opens in our window. And the reason I go through this exercise is I want to show you that when I hit Enter, it auto-indents for me. There's a lot of functionality that's just built right into this. A common construct in Business Intelligence Markup Language is where you have the plurals. So in this case, I'm going to create a new package. There's packages, and I know that's difficult to see on the screen. I'll zoom in just a minute, but if I double-click that, packages pops up. And if I hit the close bracket, it actually completes the tag for me, and it puts the cursor right there in the middle where I'm ready to type next. Well, I'm going to hit Enter once. It puts the closing tag for packages down 2 lines, gives me a new line, and indents properly for me. Just time-saving stuff. It's not, it's not huge when you look at it. Just one of these little packages at a time. But these are the kinds of things that can shave minutes off your day and hours out of your week. So I really want to commend them for adding that. When I start another tag, there's really only 3 options. I can start a comment or one of these question marks, or I can create a new package. So I'm going to double-click on Package. And when I hit the space bar, there's a list here of all of the attributes for the package tag. The IntelliSense here is impressive. So when I do that again, the first thing I'm going to pick is I'm just going to start typing NAM for name. It immediately takes me down to the name tag. I can complete it there. As soon as I do, it gives me the equal signs and 2 double quotes. And I'll just call this one test package. If I hit space again, I get the a list of the attributes again. One of the attributes that I need to add here is constraint mode, but I'll tell you what, rather than add it, I'm going to let you see what happens when I don't. Note I've got a blue squiggly line now under package, and if I hover over that, it tells me the required attribute constraint mode is missing. Pretty helpful. So I'm going to pick constraint mode, and it gives me the list here of options, linear or parallel. I'm going to just choose linear just so we can be done here. And I have to make one other change, and that change is to the package protection level property. In 2012, we have, in addition to package protection levels, we also have project protection levels. And one of the things that must happen is we have to specify, they have to match. The reason we have project level protection levels is because we have project level connection managers, and they can be encrypted. So because we want to have those that encryption level at the project level and another encryption level or protection level at the package, Microsoft decided let's just insist that those are the same. I'm not using the default. If I leave this like the Biml as it's shown here, sorry. If I if I leave that, it will generate a package protection level of don't save sensitive. And that's they do that because that's the recommended development pattern. You want to set that to don't save sensitive because it makes you externalize all of your values, anything that is sensitive. And the reason that I don't do that is because I've got some other things that I'm going to show you in this package where I have set that level. Well, that was long-winded. So I start typing. I type protection level equals, and it gives me again the list of all that are available. And I'm going to choose the SQL Server Integration Services default encrypt sensitive with user key. The reason I do that is because that's the protection level of the project. And if I right-click on the project, go to Properties, and look at the project, you'll see here that the protection level is set to that. Again, whatever this is set to, every package that you develop in the project must match it. So I did all that to do this. I can right-click now on this Biml script and generate the SSIS packages from it. When I do that, it creates a package called test package. And if we double-click this and go look at this test package, we can see, clicking F4, all of the properties that we set, including the encrypt sensitive with user key, is set there. And because that matches the project level, I can actually execute this empty SSIS package. And we see down at the very bottom here that package execution completed with success. So very handy. The IntelliSense is rock solid. And you can handcraft business intelligence markup language inside of the Visual Studio environment with Bits Helper installed. Not very difficult. If you want to know more about Biml itself, if you go to verigence.com/Biml, it'll take you to Biml capabilities, and there's some information under the support link here. If I hover over support, you can see there's information about a product called Mist that generates Biml for you. There's the Biml language reference, the Biml API, some samples, and some forums. There's also a site called bimlscript.com that includes some good examples. I want to point this out. There's some getting started videos here that'll walk you through. And one last place before we dive into the rest of the demo is the SQLServerCentral.com Stairway to Biml. These stairway articles are, their purpose is to walk someone from no knowledge about a product or a technology into some good knowledge. And in fact, what I'm doing for you today is basically walking through level 2, level 3, and level 4. So if you want to go back, you can pull down those 3 articles, walk through those steps, and there's a screenshot for every step, and I really dissect it, how we build these. So this is an abbreviated version. This presentation is that this grew out of a chapter in the book SSIS Design Patterns, which is available at Amazon, and it's about 1.5 years old now. So there's a chapter in there on Biml. So without any more ado here, let me close this script, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this test package that was generated by that script. I'm going to delete Biml script 1, which was generated as well. And I've kind of covered what I was going to talk about in the first Biml script file here. I want to now look at an incremental load. And one other thing I guess I should point out is if you want to know more about incremental loads, there is also a stairway to SSIS out there, the Stairway to Integration Services. I've written 17 articles so far. I'm working on number 18. Number 16 went live out there today. And there's an awful lot in levels 3, 4, and 5 about incremental loads. I'm not going to exhaust that. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm actually going to generate the incremental load from this, and then we'll walk through kind of mixing and matching. We'll look at the code, and we'll look at what was built. You'll see that didn't take very long at all to build this package, and it's you know, it's not trivial. One thing that I want to point out is if you have a question as we're talking, please ask it, and Reza will answer them in the chat window if he can, and if he wants to. Reza, you can raise questions to me. Are there any questions for me so far, Reza?
There are some questions, not kind of technical questions. There was a question about where session recording would be, and can audience actually have their session recording. I've answered that. So if you have any other questions, just pop in the questions panel and ask your question. I or Andy would answer that. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Reza. And if you see a question and I'm running my mouth, feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, I'll do that.
We will we'll answer those questions as they come up.
Yep. Okay, great.
Okay, so let's start in the middle with the incremental load. Just walk through what's been built here. I want to look in the data flow itself. And I'm going to open up, this is an OLEDB source at the very top, and I'm double-clicking it to open it up. Now, I have to tell a little story here. Years ago, I wrote an article for SQL Server Central, and around the same time, I had a blog post up at SQLblog.com about incremental loads and the anatomy of an incremental load, how to build one. And I got some responses from folks because lots of good questions, but some particularly interesting questions were, I have 800 tables. How many SSIS packages do you advocate me building? Well, in that article, I advocated that build a simple SSIS package for each table. And I advocate in the packages using as few data flows as possible, optimally one. However, if you're loading something like a snowflake dimension, and the classic example of that is in AdventureWorks, where you have the category for products, the subcategory for products, and then the products themselves. Well, in that case, that's a snowflake. You need to load the categories first, then you want to load the subcategories and do a lookup on the category ID for the subcategory, and then finally you want to load the products themselves and do a lookup against the subcategory ID. In that case, you would load all three of those tables in one package, and they would be in that order: category, then subcategory, and then product. And optimally, I say use one data flow per table, so that package would have 3 data flows in it. So my rule on that is I like to try to use as few data flows as possible per package, optimally one, and one table or view load per data flow. Now, why do I say that? I'm not going to go into all of the reasons, but I'll tell you it's going to reduce your amount of testing time. It's going to provide isolation and what software developers will call decoupling between the various package loads. That leads to a whole bunch of other cool things like it promotes code reuse, and it supports maintainability. So that's the short version of why I do it this way. But this person asked me, if I've got 800 tables, how many SSIS packages do I need? And my answer was, well, 800. And it broke my heart to tell him that. And I wrote him back and said, you know, here's the rest of the story. If you've got that many tables, it's probably worth your time to learn enough of a .NET language to create these loaders programmatically. And you can do that. You can build SSIS packages from .NET. Sorry, I had a message box pop up here. But you can actually do that. And at the time, Biml wasn't viable, so it wasn't a good solution for that. But later, it became that way. And someone else wrote me another email very similar. I think they had 1,000 or 1,200 packages. And it's just at that point you're looking at about a couple of hours, about 2 hours per incremental load SSIS package to build it, to test it, and to feel comfortable with it. That's been my experience. If you've got 1,000 of those, that's a year. That's right at that's 2,000 hours. That's, you know, if you take a couple of weeks off for vacation, and I hope you're doing that, that's 50 weeks times 2, you know, times the 1,000 packages at 2 hours a package. That comes out to a year's worth of work. And I'm here to tell you that I've used that commercial product that Verigence sells, Mist, and I've been able to generate over 900 tables, loaders for over 900 tables, and I've been able to do that in a matter of minutes, so about 20 minutes. And that was a little less than a year's worth of work. It's about 10.5 months worth of work that I did in 20 minutes. That's why I'm talking about Biml today. It changes that game. Now there's some domain rules about why that changes the game, and we'll discuss those as we go through. But this is an optimal solution for something like staging. Here is my incremental load source, and that article, by the way, back when I wrote that article, I was still prefixing the table names with TBL and view names with VW. Don't hate me. I've stopped doing that, but I wanted to use the same tables and databases I used to write that article for my demos here, because it directly relates to that.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you. There's a question by Ryan which says, do you offer any workshops on BIML?
Say that one more time.
Do you offer any workshops on BIML?
We do, yes. And in fact, Scott Curry, who is the CEO of Verigence and the person who, basically the father of Biml, is in Australia. I want to say he was there this week doing a seminar, a day-long seminar in cooperation with some partners there. And that's not just Biml, it's also using the commercial product, but you can gain an awful lot of knowledge out of attending one of those. And we did last year in Charlotte. We also delivered last October, we delivered a day-long seminar that was on Biml. And yes, we've done that. Scott and I have also offered training, and I don't want to go much beyond that because I'm not supposed to push work stuff, and I agree with that rule. But the answer is yes, we definitely do.
Cool, thanks.
All right, thank you. So let's look at how this is built, and I'm going to do a little screen adjusting here. I have to close this to do it. Bring this back over, and I want to get this positioned well. And I like where it is there. So at the very top of the Biml file over here, I have I've got a couple of connections defined, and you can see the connection name, and you know, and then the name. There's a connection string out here as well. And what this does is it defines the connections that I'm going to use inside of the SSIS package. Now, what the engine, when it interprets the Biml and emits the SSIS package, it's going to see those connections and it's going to make connection managers out of those. So that's one use for them. One interesting thing though about this is these top 5 lines, I could copy them or cut them out of here and paste them into another Biml file. I'd need to leave line 1 in here for this file to still be viable. And I would need to add line 1 and the last line, a closing Biml tag to that file. I could make a 6-line SSIS package, a 6-line Biml file that would only hold the connection information. And then when it comes time to build the Biml file, to build the SSIS package from Biml, I could highlight both the connections Biml file and the SSIS Biml file, and it would construct exactly what we see here. The benefit of that is I can have multiple connection files, one for dev, one for some integration server, one for a quality server or testing server, and another one for production. And when it comes time to build this incremental loader, I can just click on the SSIS part of it, which really starts at line 6, and then I could highlight whichever other collection of connections that I've got built in the other Biml file, the connections Biml file, for whichever tier I'm aiming at. A lot of flexibility there in that. But when we get on the inside of the data flow, you can see when we reach line 12 is where we actually hit the data flow itself. And I've chosen to specify my precedence constraints. Remember earlier when we looked at constraint mode and the options were linear and parallel? I picked parallel here for this one. And so parallel means I'm going to tell you every time there's a precedent constraint where to put it. If I'd have chosen linear, it would infer that I want a on success precedence only constraint, and it would infer those between each task in the order they appear in the Biml file. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's less code if you do linear. And I didn't need parallel here; I just did it for demo. But here's the data flow itself, and there's the precedence constraint at the very beginning. And then in my collection of transformations, I start with the OLEDB source, and that is exactly what we're looking at over here. So the connection name, it tells you the connection name, and the external table input is it reads from dbo.tbl source. Now, in real life, I don't build OLEDB connection managers like this. I always use a query. I'll change the data access mode to a SQL statement, and I'll build it like that. But Biml is fully capable of building it any way that I want. I just want to make sure that you understand that for production-ready loads, I've stopped using table or view. So if you profile what happens to the database when you do table or view, you will see a statement select star from dbo.tbl source. So I want to get around that select star. I don't want to use it unless I absolutely have no choice. The next item is a correlated join that basically is looking at, this is a lookup transformation, and what it does is it's going to go against the destination table, and this is going to make this load incremental. What do I mean by an incremental load? It's only going to put new rows in the database that are new in the source, new in the destination. It's going to write new rows from the source to the destination. Then it's going to detect where the rows aren't new. It's going to look for changes in the fields. So it's going to join on what we call the business key, and that's a unique identifier for every row in the source, and it should match the rows in the business keys in the destination. And I'm going to use this lookup for two things. Pardon me. The first thing is I'm going to do this join, and I'm telling it down here at the very bottom of this page here. This is the general page on the lookup transformation. It says specify how to handle rows with no matching entries. And I keep saying join and lookup and using them interchangeably. That analogy breaks down at some point, but it's good enough for our purposes right now. And I'm telling this by setting the redirect rows to a no match output, I'm creating a scenario where it's attempting to do an inner join, but if it doesn't find a match, it's going to send the rows down another output. So for matches, they're going to come out of the match output. If it doesn't find a match on the business key, the unique identifier, it's going to redirect that row down another output. The default setting, by the way, for specify how to handle rows with no matching entries is fail component. So if you just pop a lookup onto a data flow and configure it to, aim it at some table, and then click OK and keep going, if it doesn't find a match, it fails. And back in the days of 2005 SSIS, you didn't have a no match output. One of the options was you would send rows down the failure output, and those would be your new rows. If it doesn't find a match on that business key, that's a new row. And that was a way to do that back in 2005. So it's I'm not going to go into the cache modes or the connection manager stuff here. I do that in the series, the incremental load stairway at SQL Server Central, and I highly recommend that you check that out to learn more about this pattern. So the connection here, I'm actually reading from the, I'm using SQL query to pull in all of the columns, select column ID, which is my business key here, column A, column B, column C from dbo.tbl dest. Again, there's that TBL thing again. And this is the destination. It's connecting to the destination database. it's going against the destination table. Inside of the logic of the lookup here, I gotta shut this down so I can scroll and move this over a little bit. Here's that lookup in the inside of Biml, and you see the OLEDB connection name, the no match behavior, redirect rows to the no match output. You see that direct input statement, select call ID, call A, call B, call C from TBL dest. And then below this, you see this outputs part. And to really get into that, I need to go over to the last column. And remember, I'm bringing back those 4 columns from the destination. And this is mapping here. This is what I'm doing, is I'm defining more attributes of the join. So what you see in this table, these collections of grids, is the available input column. So this is what's coming from the source. Call A, call B, call C, and call ID. And you see that I've got this little bar that I'm drawing, or this line I'm dropping from call ID to call ID. That's like the on clause of the join. So I'm saying join on the business key. On the available lookup column side, this is the results of that query from the destination. I've got these boxes checked, call A, call B, and call C. I'm bringing those back, and you can see below that, I'm aliasing them as DEST for destination underscore call A, dest underscore call B, dest underscore call C. The reason I'm doing that is the fields in this source match the fields in the destination. Their names are the same. So if I don't alias them, SSIS will put a parenthesis 1 out to the side of it for the column names, and I really don't like that. Also, I think this implies more of my logic, more of what I'm trying to do here. It's a better, cleaner understanding of what I'm up to. And comparing this again to the join, checking those 3 boxes is equivalent to adding 3 more columns from the joined table into the select statement. Hope that makes sense. The alias is like saying as after each one of those columns in the select statement. And I'm bringing those back for a reason. And what I'm doing is, again, I've got my 2 outputs here. My no match output is going to contain new rows. And it's going to write those new rows directly to the table, TBL dest. My match output, now I found a row that's in my destination that's also in my source. So that's okay, because that often happens. But I only want to continue working with that row if the other field values have changed. Now I want to talk a little bit about what happened at that correlate. When I checked those boxes and I brought those 3 columns back from the destination, it basically appended those values to the row. So I've got one long row, just like you'd have in a join, with my source information in it and my destination information if it's a match. In the no match output, I don't care about what's in the destination, so it's only got the source columns in there. And we can see this. If I double click here on the no match, I can open the editor. And so this is the data flow path editor, and if I click on the metadata tab here, what we're looking at is something that looks a lot like a table definition. In fact, this is the buffer inside of the, or at least the buffer format inside of the data flow. It doesn't look like much, but this is a real peek under the hood of what's going on inside of a data flow. And I call this tablish buffers when I talk about them. But you can see the data type, you can see the column name. For things that are like a string, DTSTR is a string. You can see the length of that. And there's a lot of information here, but the most important point I want to make here is there's only these 4 columns that are coming in from the source. If I double click on the match, the match side here, and look at the metadata, now we see that there's 7 columns here. I didn't bring the ID back from the destination table because I've already got it, and I'm joining on it. So it's the same as call ID. I already know that. There's no real need to repeat that value. You see the original call A, call B, call C. Those are coming from the source. And then you see the destination columns that are coming back from the destination. So I hope all that makes sense. Are there any questions, Reza, that I need to answer?
Hi, Andy. Yes, there are 2 questions for you I've assigned to you. If you have a look in the questions bar, one of them is about the IntelliSense, which says, Natalia says that I cannot see IntelliSense for BIML. I was trying to use help from its helper discussion. Nothing helps. Could you answer on that?
All right, let me, I am trying to get the question box to get bigger. I'm not doing a good job of it.
You can just like that. There's a little.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
So you cannot see IntelliSense for Biml. Okay, there is there's some help for that if you can't see it, and if you absolutely if you can't find the help, I know there's an article at Verigence.com, and I want to say it's in the forum there, under the Biml forum, and if and I also think there's a copy of it over at bimlscript.com. If you absolutely can't find that, email me. My email address is andy.leonard@gmail.com, and Leonard is Leonard. It's like Leonard. So if you want to email me, I can get you in touch with someone at Verigence who can point you right to an article about that. It's also possible, because there's a lot of integration here between Visual Studio, that if you've got some other products added onto your Visual Studio version, and there's a ton of them out there for assisting with development, they may not play nice together. And I know that IntelliSense can be a little bit flaky when it comes to that, to developing add-ins of any kind, be it Bids Helper or anything. So it's not, it's probably not you. It's probably just some settings inside of Visual Studio. I see the other question here is, it says it looks like the SQL query for the OLEDB source needs to be manually direct put. Can we use metadata like information schema to smartly generate the script? You're getting ahead of me. So I will answer your question later, I promise. I'm getting there. And then I'm not sure if that next question is directed at me or not, Reza.
Yes, there are a couple of
Okay, so what would you do if there are many rows, many no-match rows? Yeah, just have errors in there. I would not. I would just, if there are no-match rows, I'm going to send them down to the destination table. Those are my new rows, so I'm going to go ahead and load those. And then with the advent of merge, would you suggest using merge called from a store procedure instead of SSIS? In some cases, the answer is yes. And getting into those use cases at this point, I don't have a good set of rules right now on doing that, but I will share that that we do that at Linchpin People when we build data warehouses. And I'll also share that I'm going to show you some dynamic generation here coming up in the next part of this, the next demo. But we've used the capabilities of Biml to automatically generate those merge statements. So it gets very interesting when you're doing that. So I love this for the design patterns that are incremental loads into staging databases. So great question so far. I think that's all, Reza. Do you see any new ones?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so we went through the lookup here, and here's the code for the lookup. And that, you can see again, there's those destination columns. They're listed as target columns inside of the Biml here. I'm going to scroll down now, and here's one other thing. This is this is the destination. That's if it's a no match row, and notice I've got to identify the output path name here, correlate.nomatch, and that's being written straight to the table. So those are my new roles being handled. Next, I'm looking at what do I do with my matched rows, and you can see here coming out of the conditional split, it's named filter, and the output path is that's feeding this input is called correlate.match. This is the match output of the lookup. And what I'm doing here, very similar to hand coding the select statement, is I've got an expression, and conditional splits use the expression language. Either you love expression language or you hate it. I started out hating it, but then I learned more about it, and as I did, I began to love it. It's very fast. It's also very difficult to learn. It's probably one of the hardest things in SSIS to learn. But and it's kind of a hybrid between what I call curly brace languages, C, C#, Java, and Transact SQL. So that's part of the reason why it's so confusing. But what I've done is I've defined an output in that called changed rows, and we're going to go look at the output in just a minute. And in changed rows, I've got an expression defined that says if column A, and remember, the rows coming into this have matched on column ID. So what it's asking for here is for those rows that have column A and destination column A in the same row now with a match on the business key, call ID, it's checking, does column A not equal destination column A? Has the value in column A in the source changed since the last time we loaded this row? Because it's there already. We know it's there because the column ID is joined. It matched. If it was a new row and they didn't match, it would have loaded it as a new row down the no match output. So we're beyond that now. So it's saying, does column A not equal destination column A? Why am I looking at not equals? Because I'm trying to detect differences. If I was looking for all of them to match, I'd do this a different way. But I'm trying to detect the output path name here is changed rows. I'm trying to fill a buffer with rows that the business keys are the same and one or more of the other columns, the attribute columns, have changed. That's the essence of this incremental load. I'm looking for the changes between column A and destination column A. The two vertical pipes that you see following the closed paren on destination column A, that means OR. So a logical OR is in place, and it says, is there a difference in column A, or is there a difference in column B, or is there a difference in column C? And if one or more of those evaluates to true, if A is different and B and C are the same, if A is the same and B and C are both different, one or more, it'll flow into that changed rows bucket. That's where this row is going to go. One thing that's important to remember when you're dealing with SSIS data flows, you may look at individual columns in a row that's flowing by, but you're acting on a row. You're always working on a row. You can add columns to the row. You can change the values of columns in the row, but you're always working on a row. It's important to recognize that. So what does this look like inside of the conditional split transformation named filter? If we double click that and open it up, you can see that there's my changed rows output name, and you can see my condition right there, at least the beginning of the conditional split condition. The rows that aren't changed at this point are unchanged rows. Remember, we've pulled our new rows out. Only changed or unchanged rows are flowing down this pipe. Unchanged rows, I've got them mapped into the default output name down here at the very bottom. Usually I will rename that default output name to unchanged rows so that I can manage it moving forward. But this really is, this is an incremental load, and this is what makes it incremental. The very next step that we see is I am sending the rows that do meet the changed row criteria. You can see it here. I'm sending the changed rows to another OLEDB destination, and this is a table called stage updates. I'm not going to dig into this a whole lot, but your other option here is to send this to an OLEDB command and run an update statement there. I highly recommend that you not do that. This is going to set you up for what's called a set-based update. And the way I create these tables almost all the time is I'll set up my connection manager, I'll come into the editor, I'll click this new button over here. When I do that, it generates a statement for me, a create table statement. And this create table statement is going to make that stage updates table for me, but I want to modify it a little bit. Remember, I know that my new values coming in here for changed rows are the ones that I want to send to the destination table. I'm not concerned about what's there already. I'm going to overwrite that. So what I would do in generating my table is I would just highlight part of this data definition language statement, this DDL, and I would change it so that it looks like this. Create the table, stage updates, with a placeholder for the ID, a placeholder for column A, a placeholder for column B, and a placeholder for column C. Interestingly, it got the name of the table from the name of the OLADB destination, and it got the name of the columns and their data types from that metadata we looked at a minute ago, that tablish buffer. It's reading the data flow path, and it's interpreting. Remember, I don't know if you remember or not, I didn't point it out for the call ID, but its data type was DT_I4. That's a 4-byte integer. And that DT_I4 is a SQL Server Integration Services data type, but it knows because I'm talking to a SQL Server Connection Manager, and it's queried that type and says, oh, this is SQL Server. It's converted call IDs when it creates a table for that. It knows it's an int. Now, a little bit of a diversion here, but sometimes when you're trying to pick data types and stuff like that, like if you're trying to call to a stored procedure or receive a value back, it can be utterly frustrating. If you're using SQL Server, or if you're going against DB2 or MySQL or Oracle, any of those values, you can find yourself beating your head against the wall trying to figure out which data type do I actually use here. Part of that is because SSIS is application development. It's not database development. It has SQL Server in the name, and that's a little unfortunate. This is actually application development, but it's usually strictly development against database and databases. And it suffers, just like application and web development suffers, from this disconnect, this impedance mismatch between database tiers and application tiers. And you can connect to any type of database out there. Anything that has an OLADB interface can work in an OLADB source or destination, and that includes Oracle and DB2 and the others. And what SSIS is doing here, this is why SSIS has its own set of data types internally. It works with DTI4. It works with DT_STR for the string, like in column A. But it has to convert between these data types. So when it gets to a place like this where it has to interact with the database engine, it has to convert that. And it does that by querying the provider. And there's a bunch of mapping that occurs under the hood for you. And sometimes it can be frustrating. But a lot of that frustration should not be aimed at SSIS. It should be aimed at that impedance mismatch. And that whole ORM field was built to manage that type of problem. So trust me, I'll pick on SSIS when they did something dumb. In this case, it's just not their fault. It's a problem that spans software development. So I could click OK, and it would actually try and execute this, but I'd get an error because that table already exists. I'm going to click Cancel. And then on the mappings page, you can see that from the available input columns, I've only mapped the the 4 that I want, the ID and the 3 data columns. And I'm going to store these inside of a stage table. When I get out of the data flow, and I'm done with the data flow at that point, I have an execute SQL task called apply stage updates. And what this does, pardon me, is it runs a set-based update. And it's there's a lot of different names for this. I don't know the right name. I call it a update with a join, or a correlated update statement, or a bunch of different stuff. But this SQL Server, you can use this in. I don't know that you can use this in all the other languages, but I know SQL Server's version of Transact SQL will accept this. I say update, and then the alias of the destination table. And then I've got that from clause hanging out down there, from table dest, and there is the dest alias. And note that I'm joining it to the updates table I just showed you how to create. I'm joining it on the business key. And then I'm updating all of the rest of the columns that are in there. I'm setting the destination column A to my update column A. And what's nice about this is it doesn't invoke any type of iteration. Now, the OLEDB command does this one row at a time, and it'll take forever. If you've got any, 20, 30,000 rows in there, it'll, take a couple, 3 minutes. If you do this statement, on a million rows, it's going to happen, in just a second or two. It's just a fast way to do this. It's a set-based operation versus an iterative operation. And Microsoft loves it when I say this. You probably heard that cursors are bad. That's not true. Cursors are fine. It's what's wrong is SQL Server stinks at cursors. So, and if you look at other engines, almost all of them handle any type of iteration better than SQL Server, and it's part of the reason for that is SQL Server sets that bar pretty low. And it's not. I'm not trying to just pick on SQL Server. I just want to say that every software application has its corners, and an iteration just happens to be a weakness for SQL Server. Joining is it does a fantastic job on joining on integers and binaries and stuff like that, and it does a better job than, say, I don't think you can run a statement like this in Oracle, for instance, but at the same time I don't think you need to. You could actually, I wouldn't use an OLEDB command to invoke this in Oracle, but I would probably write a cursor here that would roll over this data and pump data into Oracle. So I'm no Oracle PL SQL expert by a long shot. And a friend actually wrote me this morning and asked me that very question. And that was my suggestion, was go ahead and write a cursor. It probably will fly in Oracle. So once this is done, I've got my updates and my new rows loaded into the destination. And I'm done with that stage updates table. But what I do at the very beginning here is I write a truncate statement in another execute SQL task to truncate that table, because I don't want those rows in there forever. And I truncate them just before I load stage updates, because I want those rows sitting there in case something unfortunate happens and I want to go back later and look at which rows were updated. It just gives me another spot to check about what happened in this load. You can truncate it after you're done with the applying the updates, and if you have space issues, that's common. Maybe you don't want to leave, or maybe it's just an inordinate amount of updates. You don't want to leave them sitting here, a billion rows sitting there all night or till the next load. Over in the Biml, we see that here's my stage updates destination. Not an awful lot there. Pretty much what you saw before in the other destination. You see me coming out of the data flow here and doing this execute SQL task. So here's my hand-coded direct input set-based join, and and would I ever do what I just showed you inside of Biml? No. No, I would not. This takes a lot longer to deal with than to just build a package. And of course, at the very tippy top, one last stop, that initial truncate execute SQL task, there it is. Pardon me. So why would I never do this? Because it's dumb. This is going to take me longer than actually building the package. So I showed you all that so I could show you this. If I go into, I'm going to delete this one package here. And one of the things that's nice about Biml is the ability to embed, it's more like a C# or .NET language into this. This is C#, and I probably learned a lot more C# doing this than I knew before I did this. But Biml has helped me with that. I'm a VB programmer. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I like C#. I think it's a fine language. And if you like, if people ask me today what language should I learn in .NET, my recommendation is C#. At the same time, it's a little more typing, and it's a little less intuitive, in my opinion, than VB. And there's really not that much difference in the languages today as there was back when I started. I learned BASIC in 1975, so that was 38 years ago, 39 at this point, yeah. Wow. But C# is a good language to learn, and there's support for both inside of Biml. So you can see that we're importing a namespace here, and if you're familiar with old active service pages, ASP development, this is going to look real familiar. And I was an MCSD back before .NET came out, and I did a lot with ASP. This looks very much like ASP. And you can see that we're doing import statements here with these less than pound statements, these tags. And then we've got a connection that we define there on that third line. And that's reaching into that variance.hadron.corellower.schema management. It's reaching right into that schema manager, and it's creating a connection against SQL Server. And then after we establish that connections, I go get a list of all the tables. I get actually a collection called tables. And I do that using calling on that connection mode we created on line 3. And then there's a method inside of there called generate table nodes. And this is where it starts to get exciting, especially for those folks that have 800 and 1,000 and 1,200 tables, right? Because now I've got this list of tables. And yeah, I've defined my connections inside here, and that's okay. But look at what happens right after packages. Beneath the connections close tag, there's another one of those C# statements, the less than pound sign. And that C# line is for each table in tables. And then immediately preceding that, there's the package definition. I'm going to create an SSIS package for every table I see in that source. And it's going to be an incremental load pattern. You're going to see it's remarkably similar. This is that last SSIS package with some stuff injected, the one that built the incremental loader. It's just been templatized so that we can use it now to create an incremental load SSIS package for every table that we see. I'm going to tell you now there's 4 in there, but I've done this for, like I said, a little more than 900. And it works. And this is an outstanding solution for things like staging. Why do I say things like staging? The more complex the transformation rules become in the domain, then the more effort it's going to take inside of inside of Biml to make it what I call templatable. It's going to be a lot of logic in there to, if this, then do that, or maybe a lot of case statements. Maybe I'm managing these dynamically. Can it be done? Absolutely. In fact, we've got a project that we hit a table of metadata that basically contains mapping information. Just like if you were doing ETL and you had an analyst create a mapping document in Excel, we're doing both. We're hitting Excel for mapping information and using that to define all this. We're also hitting tables to do that. That's just what we're doing in Linchpin these days. That would take way longer than the time we have today to cover. But you can see exactly what's happening. There's our truncate, and it's starting with the truncate stage updates underscore whatever the name of this particular table is. Remember, we're going through a loop of for each table in the collection of tables. So it's going to pull that table name out a lot and reuse it. It gets down here. We see. I want to bring this up and highlight it. When we get into the data flow, and we start doing things like the source, It uses another method in that Hadron engine on the table called getColumnList, and that returns a comma delimited list in a string. And then table.schema qualified name will put the brackets around the schema name, the brackets around the table name, and it'll return all of that information. So we do the same thing in the lookup, where and in this case, the reason this works, one of the reasons this works, is because the source and the destination table names are identical. That's for demonstration purposes. I find that often happens in production when we're building this, but it's I want to make sure that you understand that I'm cheesing out just a little bit, because when especially here in this lookup, when I'm looking up against the destination name, I'm using the source table name, that DBO dot less than pound equals table dot name. That's the source name. I just know that the names are identical, and I find that about 70–80% of the time in staging solutions, that's exactly what I have. But it's no big deal for me to go hit a mapping table that has a source table name, destination table name, and just go read, look up the source table name and go get the destination table name. I could do that inside of here. You probably could too. You can write that C#. So even though this isn't what I would consider correct, it isn't such a bad example as maybe it may seem. I'm also scrolling through, and I'm not going to run through all of this inside of here. I highly recommend, if you want to know more about what's happening in this inputs tag and the lookup, that you go read the articles in the Stairway to Biml, and I'll break that down pretty well inside of there. And it starts to get pretty intense, and I'm not going to go through everything else because I'm running short on time. But what I will do is show you. This is where it gets probably the most busy, is where I'm generating that set-based update. And this logic will generate that set-based update where there's more than one field in the business key. So that, if that made sense to you, great. And if it didn't, I just want to apologize. And what I want to do before we go any farther is just show you this. If I right-click this and execute it, generate SSIS packages. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it very quickly blew out these 4 packages. And I'm going to pick number 2. I could have picked any of these. They all look the same. And if I zoom into the data flow, you can see that they look remarkably similar to what we generated before because they're generated from the same template. A couple of points about this. Number 1, all of this is automatically generated code. If I have 900 packages in this solution for 900 tables, I'm going to unit test the packages that deal with the tables that have edge case stuff, maybe stuff like custom defined column type data types or anything else that makes it edgy. Other than that, I'm not really going to do a lot of unit testing. If one of these runs, they're all going to run. They're built from the same pattern. They're built from the metadata of the tables in the source. And in some cases, in advanced cases, metadata from the destinations. I'm going to do integration testing, but again, I'm not going to beat that to pieces. I'm going to run it. If it succeeds, I'm going to go make sure that it did what I think it was supposed to do, move the data from the source to the destination. And because of my confidence level with Biml, I'm probably going to run row counts on the source and compare those to row counts on the destination. And if those match, I'm going to call it done. I'm going to re-execute the integration test just to make sure that the loads are incremental and the numbers don't change. And my testing time just went way down. It's probably it's a fraction of what it was in the day when I was hand coding all of these, because the machine is not going to make the mistake that I made. It's not going to miss things. And it's going to build, this expression, for instance, based on the values that are included in there. Now, there's a bug in here. It's actually generating a test for the business key, but that's okay. They're always going to match. Logically, it's the same, but it's an extra step, and I don't like it for that. It's going to always build this statement the same way. For the lookup, it's going to build my source the same way, again, I'm pulling from a table named source 2. It's going to always do the mapping into my stage updates the same way. It's going to always do the mapping into my destination for new rows the same way. All of this is going to just work every time, and if I execute this, it'll run. And there's examples of new rows, unchanged rows, and changed rows in this. So you'll see that 5 rows came in, 2 rows were new, 3 rows had matches, and 1 of those was an actual changed row. I apologize for running a little long here, but I wanted to make sure there's no more questions before we wrap up.
There are actually a big stack of.
Let's see. I'm looking at the questions.
Yeah.
I see a bunch here.
Let's see. There's a big stack. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. With the advent of merge, that was that last one. Yeah, so you could see that you could auto-generate a merge statement as well and do it that way, and there's lots of good reasons to do that. On the conditional split, how are nulls handled? I didn't address managing nulls in this. I ran along as it was, Scott, but that's a great question. I've got some information on that in the, I think it's in level 3 of the Integration Services Stairway, and I really picked that apart in there. Those stairways, you know, they take quite a while to write, and frankly, I think I've written more there than I have in all of my other books combined. But you know, I really had Steve came to me, Steve Jones, the editor of SQL Server Central, and he said, I want something that'll walk somebody from the ground up in SSIS. I want tons of screenshots, and I want everything explained. And I said, you know, I love writing like that. In fact, the stuff I've sent to editors for the books has been that way, and they always go, you're wasting a lot of space with pictures. So it's different when you have to pay for the paper, I guess, to print it on. But they always come back and say, take this picture out and just write what it's showing. But not with Steve. So he was like, show everybody every step. So it's a really good, you know, it's a really good way to learn SSIS, at least the bit of it that I know, and I recommend it. But yeah, I don't do the derived column, Scott, to answer your question. What I usually do is I manage the null using the isNull function in expression language, and I set it to another, you know, to some value that should never appear in that column, and I compare the left side to the right side, both wrapped in those isNull functions. And you have another question, Scott. How many of your customers are using hashed values for the functionality? That's a fantastic question. The well, we've got a pattern, a pretty rock solid pattern for managing hashes, hash values now, and we use the hash bytes function inside of T-SQL, and then we compare, you know, the source hash to the destination hash. I no longer do what's inside of the filter now for expression language is what I call a brute force change detection algorithm, and it works okay. Don't get me wrong, but if I'm loading, you know, millions of rows into a table with billions of rows in it, it's just not practical, and I can really kill the speed, speed up everything dramatically by just comparing on hashes. It's not something that I talk about in this talk. I apologize, but we are using Biml to generate that. And let's see, Jamie said, would it evaluate nulls as changed with? Yeah, no, it won't. But again, look at level 3 of the Integration Services Stairway, Jamie, and that'll give you a good example of using nulls with that. What can you do with C# that you can't do with VB.NET? Gosh, I don't know the answer to all of that. I know there's subtle differences between the languages. Most developers never run into that. But in the context of Biml and Vids Helper, I don't believe you have IntelliSense support for VB. And then that may be the answer to the earlier question about I can't get IntelliSense. If you're using VB, it's not there. I know that there's discussions about adding that, but it's not a high priority. Most people are just using C#. For the 800 tables, would you divide it into several? Absolutely. I made 800 SSIS packages. Yeah, just like I showed you here, making these 4. Would Andy be able to share the C# multiple tables, building code. In fact, everything that I've shown you today is out there at SQLServerCentral.com in the Stairway to Biml. Those levels 2, 3, and 4 are exactly what I showed you today. So you can go get it. Create custom tables that drive the Biml package generation. Yes, you can. And dealing with 180 tables, you can. It's, as you can imagine, it's beyond the scope of what we talked about today. But you absolutely can, and we're doing it. So I know it's possible. Chris asked, does Biml in SSDT allow you to create project parameters and reference them in packages? It does. There's some demos out there at bimlscript.com that'll show you just that. At Linchpin, we've been working in 2012 SSIS with Biml and the product MIST for a couple of years now. I don't think I want to say it's been 2 years plus since we did something in that wasn't 2012. We're actually doing some 2014 work as well. For DTS packages and generate from Biml versus try and migrate. Yeah. So it sounds like Michael has had a similar experience. And one thing to mention about MIST, and MIST is pricey, but it's worth it. So obviously, if you can save a year's worth of work, it's not hard to justify a $4,000 expense or $250 a month. But what I would say is, it really is a good way to templatize stuff. Now, again, it has to be the right kind of stuff. Staging works well, but not everything else does. But yes, the stairways are. Oh, thank you, Michael. Thank you. How to use SSIS to batch those updates if locking is an issue. That can be more than we talked about as well. I mean, that's more of an incremental load question than anything else. And in fact, I haven't reached that level yet. I've probably got I don't know how many more steps there's going to be in that. 17 is being edited right now, and step 18 I'm writing. I can tell you step 17 is going to make it tell you how to dynamically get information from several different sources. I'm using my old weather data, and it's going to pull that in. In step 18, we're going to deploy that to the SSIS catalog and start looking at how we manage it when we run it. Some of the more advanced topics are things like you mentioned here about keeping things from locking when you're loading them. And I don't know when that's going to come in the Stairway series, but it's definitely going to. It's going to be in there. There's a Biml user group on LinkedIn. That's true, Stephen. I'll bet you I know who you are. Stephen Curry. Yes, now I see your last name. That's Stephen's also a important person at Verigence. Not sure exactly what your title is, Stephen. I apologize for that. But not only that, but he's a friend. There's a good link in the questions box there at LinkedIn. If you search for Biml Users Group, you can find that. And lots of good information out there about Biml online. There were talks at the past summit this year. I want to say 8 or 9 mentioned Biml. Alan White and Stasia Meisner both did talks that practically focused on Biml. Those are recorded, and you can get access to those recordings at SQLpass.org from the past summit. I imagine that Biml is going to continue to be a hot topic, simply because it's one of those game-changing technologies. Like I mentioned earlier, you can reduce months and months of work, weeks, months, or even up to a year's worth of work, and you can just collapse that down into minutes or days. It takes some time to learn Biml. I'm not going to lie to you about that. And my experience has been it takes about 40 hours unassisted to work through that. But I'll bet you that's lower now that we have those stairways out there, and all of the resources at bimlscript.com and LinkedIn and everywhere else. I'm going to shut up now. I'm over, but I really want to thank you all for hanging in here with me. And I want to thank Reza. By the way, if you haven't read Reza's blog, it's astounding. I've learned an awful lot from him, especially his series on the catalog. It's required reading if you're doing SSIS 2012 development. And I highly recommend it. I reference it in at least 2 or 3 posts online because it's incredibly valuable work. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing that with us, Reza.
Thank you, Andy. That was very good session. I've learned actually a lot from your session, and you actually answered all of questions. That was very awesome job. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're very welcome. Thank you all for attending, and thank you again, Reza. And thanks to PASS for the virtual chapter. And it's been a real honor to present.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Y'all too.
Cheers.